You got a seat at this table. That alone is supposed to count as an achievement, right? Waiter, bring her the special plate, the one that matches her budget.
The waiter served Amy bread scraps and a lone lettuce leaf, while everyone else enjoyed steak and wine.
Just a joke. Lighten up.
This deal is about clean water for families who've gone years without it. That's what matters tonight, not your jokes.
All right. Let's toast to that. To you. And your very important feelings.
He lifted the glass above Amy's head and slowly poured the wine over her head. Ignoring the wine dripping from her face, Amy reached for the signed contract and ripped it apart in front of everyone.
That clean water is still getting built. It just won't be built by you.
The wine glass caught the light as Winston Logan raised it high. His voice boomed across the ballroom, bouncing off the gold ceiling and the crystal chandeliers. "To the deal of the decade!" he shouted. $500 million. Clean water for 3 counties. And the woman who made it happen. Cameras flashed. Guests clapped. Amy Amelie sat beside him at the head table, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She had built her water infrastructure company from nothing. Tonight was supposed to be her win. Her company's name was on the contract. Her signature was on the page. This deal would bring clean water to families who had waited years for it. She let herself smile, just a little. Then Logan kept talking. "You know," he said, grinning at the crowd, "some people said I only picked her firm because of quotas. Because that's how things are done now." He laughed, shaking his head like it was a joke between old friends. But hey, she showed up. She signed the papers. Good for her. The room laughed. Not because it was funny, because Logan owned half the buildings these people worked in. Nobody wanted to be the one who didn't laugh. Amy felt her jaw tighten. She kept her hands still. She had heard worse. She had sat through worse. This contract mattered more than her pride. 3 counties were waiting on this money. Kids were drinking water that wasn't safe. She was not going to let one rich man's mouth ruin that. Logan snapped his fingers at a waiter. "Bring her the special plate," he said, winking at the table. "The one that matches her budget." The waiter froze for half a second, then set down a plate in front of Amy. It was almost empty. A few scraps of bread. A single piece of lettuce. Everyone else at the table had the full dinner. Steak, roasted vegetables, wine paired just right. "A joke," Logan said, spreading his hands. "Lighten up." Amy looked down at the plate. Then she looked up at him. She did not touch the food. She did not say a word. But across the table, Patricia Vantage, her general counsel, sat frozen with her fork halfway to her mouth. Patricia's eyes were locked on Amy, waiting to see what she would do. Amy did nothing. Not yet. Logan wasn't finished. A reporter had been circling the tables all night, hoping for a quote about the contract. She stepped up to the head table now, microphone in hand, and asked Logan what this deal meant for the counties. Before Amy could answer, Logan leaned into the microphone himself. "It means the state is finally getting its diversity numbers up," he said, loud enough for 3 tables to hear. "She's a good hire, checks a lot of boxes." A few gasps, a few nervous laughs. Nobody stopped him. Amy felt heat rise in her chest, but she stood up slowly, calm, and reached for the microphone herself. She did not raise her voice. "This deal," she said, "is about clean water. For families who have been drinking unsafe water for years. That's what matters tonight, not jokes." It was a good answer. A strong answer. It should have ended things. But Logan hated being corrected, especially in front of a camera. He reached for his wine glass again, slower this time, his smile turning sharp at the edges. "Let's toast to that," he said, "to Amy and her very important feelings." He lifted the glass high over her head. For 1 second, nobody in the room understood what was happening. Then he tipped it. Red wine poured down over Amy's hair, her shoulders soaking into the fabric of her dress. Gasps shot through the room. Logan threw his head back and laughed, loud and proud, like he had just won something. "Come on," he said to the room, waving his arm. "Somebody laugh. It's funny." A few people did. Not many, but enough. Patricia shot up from her chair, furious, ready to say something. Amy raised one hand, just slightly. Not yet. Wine dripped down her back. She did not wipe it away. She did not cry. She did not shake. She reached into her bag instead, her hand steady, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The signed contract. $500 million. She held it up so the whole room could see it. The laughter started to die. The room went quiet. Not slow quiet. Not polite quiet. The kind of quiet that falls over 300 people at once, when everyone senses something is about to happen and nobody wants to miss it. Amy stood there with wine dripping down her back, the signed contract raised high in her hand. $500 million. Her signature. His signature. Months of work, meetings, promises made to 3 counties that had been drinking bad water for years. Logan was still smiling. He hadn't caught up yet. He thought this was still his moment. "What?" he said, laughing. "You gonna frame it? Put it on your wall?" Amy didn't answer him. She looked down at the paper in her hands. Then she looked at him, and she tore it in half. The sound cut through the ballroom louder than it should have. Paper ripping isn't loud, but in a room that silent, it might as well have been a gunshot. Guests actually flinched. A woman near the back dropped her champagne glass, and it shattered against the marble floor, but nobody even turned to look. Every eye was on Amy. Logan's smile froze on his face. His mouth stayed open, but nothing came out. Amy set the torn pieces down on the table, right next to his plate, right next to his wine glass. She didn't slam them down. She didn't need to. She placed them there slow and steady, so he could see exactly what he'd lost. "That water is still getting built," she said. Her voice didn't shake. It carried across the whole room. "Those 3 counties are still getting clean water. They just won't be getting it from you." She turned and walked toward the door. Nobody clapped. Not yet. They were too stunned. Then, near the back of the room, a young waiter, one of the ones who'd carried out her scraped-together plate earlier, started clapping. Slow at first. Then a few junior staffers joined in. Then more. It wasn't the whole room. Half the donors sat frozen, unsure who to side with, unsure what this meant for their own business ties to Logan. But it was enough. It was loud enough that Logan heard it, and his face went red. "She'll be begging by Monday," he shouted after her, forcing a laugh, trying to grab the room back. "You hear me? Begging." Amy didn't turn around. She walked straight through the double doors and out into the night air, wine still cold and sticky against her scalp, and she did not look back once. Inside, the room started buzzing the second the doors shut behind her. Phones came out. People whispered behind their hands. Logan stood at the head table, jaw tight, watching his own donors mutter to each other instead of to him. Roland Marsh, his COO, moved fast. He grabbed Logan by the elbow and pulled him toward a side hallway, away from the cameras still lingering near the stage. "That's bad," Marsh said, low and urgent. "That's really bad." "She tore up a piece of paper," Logan snapped. "I'll have her blacklisted from every contract in this state by Friday." "It's not the contract I'm worried about." Marsh held up his phone. On the screen, someone had already posted a shaky video. Wine pouring down over Amy's head. Logan's laugh. The room's nervous silence. "This is already online. 3 different angles. This isn't going away, Whit." Logan grabbed the phone and stared at it, his jaw working side to side. For the first time all night, his face wasn't smiling. "Fine," he said finally, handing the phone back. "Then we make sure her side of the story never gets heard louder than mine." Marsh didn't answer right away. He just watched his boss walk back toward the ballroom, already rehearsing a new smile for the cameras, already planning his next move. Somewhere outside, in the dark, Amy sat in the back of a car, wine drying stiff in her hair, and pulled out her phone. She scrolled to the video app. The recording was still there, every second of it, unedited. She hadn't planned to use it. Now she wasn't so sure she'd have a choice. Amy didn't sleep much that night. She'd scrubbed the wine out of her hair in the shower, watched the water run pink down the drain, and lay awake staring at the ceiling until the sun came up. By 7 the next morning, she was at the office. Patricia Vantage was already there, hunched over her laptop, coffee untouched and going cold beside her. "You need to see this," Patricia said, the second Amy walked in. Amy set her bag down slow. "See what?" Patricia turned the laptop around. It was a news article, posted just after midnight. The headline alone made Amy's stomach drop. "CEO breaches water contract, costs 3 counties millions in funding." She read it twice. Her name was all over it. Her company was all over it. The article claimed Amalie Water Systems had walked away from a signed deal without cause, leaving 3 counties without the money they needed for clean water. It painted Logan as the victim, a generous businessman blindsided by an unreliable partner. There was no mention of the wine, no mention of the scraps on her plate, no mention of the joke about quotas said loud enough for a reporter to hear. "He's rewriting the whole night," Amy said quietly. "That's not all." Patricia's voice was tight. "I got a call an hour ago from a contact at the state procurement office. 2 bids we were favored to win got pulled overnight. Off the table completely. No explanation given." Amy looked up sharply. "Pulled how?" "Somebody made calls," Patricia said. "Somebody with a lot of pull. It has his fingerprints all over it, even if we can't prove it yet." Amy sat down slowly in the chair across from Patricia's desk. Her hands were steady, but her mind was moving fast, running through everything that had happened in less than 12 hours. A public humiliation, a doctored story, a blacklist that could sink her company before lunch. "He's not done," Amy said. "He's just getting started." Patricia leaned forward. "Amy, I know we wanted to handle this quietly. Let the deal speak for itself. But this isn't quiet anymore. He made it public the second that story went up. This is a fight now, whether we wanted one or not." Amy was quiet for a long moment, staring at the screen, at her own name twisted into a lie. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "There's something you don't know," she said. "I recorded the whole toast last night. For myself. In case anybody ever asked what really happened in that room." She tapped the screen and turned it toward Patricia. The joke, the plate, the wine, all of it, unedited. Patricia's eyes went wide. "You have footage of him pouring wine on you?" "Every second of it," Amy said. "Audio's clear, too. You can hear exactly what he said before he did it." Patricia sat back in her chair, processing. "That changes everything. That's not your word against his anymore. That's proof." Amy looked at the phone in her hand, at the small paused frame of Logan mid-laugh, glass tipped over her own head. She thought about the 3 counties waiting on clean water. She thought about the kids drinking from taps that weren't safe. She thought about every person in that ballroom who had laughed along with him because they were too scared to do anything else. She wasn't going to let him control the story. Not this time. "Get me Danica Cross," Amy said. "Today, if she'll take the meeting." Patricia was already reaching for her phone. "She'll take it. Trust me. A story like this, she'll drop everything." Amy looked down at the torn edges still visible in her memory. The contract, ripped clean in half on his table. She hadn't torn it to end anything. She'd torn it to start something. And now it was time to make sure the whole world saw exactly why. Danica Cross's office was small and cluttered with old newspapers, but she cleared a space at her desk the second Patricia walked in with Amy behind her. "You said you had something big," Danica said, waving them into chairs. "Big enough to drop my afternoon for." Amy didn't waste time on small talk. She set her phone down on the desk and pressed play. Danica leaned in. She watched the whole thing in silence. The joke about quotas, the scraped-together plate, the reporter's question, and then the wine, pouring slow and deliberate over Amy's head while Logan laughed and waved for the room to join him. When it ended, Danica sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. "He did all that in front of cameras," Danica said. "In front of donors. And then had the nerve to put out a story blaming you?" "That's why I'm here," Amy said. "I don't want revenge. I want the truth out there. He's telling 3 counties I broke that contract. I didn't break anything. He humiliated me in front of a room full of people, and I walked away from a man who thinks he can treat people like that and still get their money." Danica was already reaching for her recorder. "I need direct quotes from you. On record, and I want to run the full video, unedited, next to his statement from last night so people can see exactly what he left out." "Run it," Amy said. "All of it." By 6 that evening, the story was live. Danica's outlet didn't soften anything. The headline was blunt: "Billionaire poured wine on black CEO at gala, then blamed her for broken deal." The video sat right at the top of the article, unedited, exactly the way Amy had recorded it. Within an hour, it had thousands of views. By midnight, it had climbed into the hundreds of thousands, shared across every platform, clipped and reclipped by strangers who'd never heard of Winston Logan before that day. Amy sat at home that night, scrolling through the comments, watching people she'd never met defend her, praise her composure, call out the room full of guests who'd laughed along with him. Her phone buzzed. "Patricia." "2 of his biggest gala donors just put out statements," Patricia said, breathless. "Both of them are pulling their names from his redevelopment project. They're citing the video directly." Amy closed her eyes for a second, letting that land. It wasn't everything. It wasn't close to everything. Her company was still locked out of 2 state bids. The blacklist was still active. But for the first time since she'd walked out of that ballroom with wine drying in her hair, she felt something shift. "That's a start," Amy said. "It's more than a start," Patricia said. "He built his whole reputation on being untouchable. People don't walk away from men like that. Not usually." "They will this time," Amy said. But even as she said it, she knew better than to celebrate. Logan hadn't built an empire by losing quietly. He'd built it by making sure everyone around him lost first. 2 donors walking away wasn't going to be enough to make him stop. It was going to make him angrier. Amy set her phone down and stared out the window at the dark street below. At the city, where 3 counties were still waiting on water they'd been promised months ago. The story was out now. The truth was out now. But the fight, she knew, was only getting started. A week passed before the next blow landed. Amy had let herself believe, just a little, that the tide was turning. The video had over 1 million views by then. Reporters kept calling. Strangers stopped Patricia on the street to say they'd seen the footage and couldn't believe what Logan had done. For the first time since the gala, it felt like the truth was winning. Then the letter arrived. It came by courier, official state letterhead, addressed directly to Amy. She opened it standing in the middle of her own office, Patricia watching her face change as she read. "They pulled it," Amy said. "Both bids. Not delayed. Pulled completely." Patricia crossed the room and took the letter from her hands, scanning it fast. This says Ameli Water Systems is no longer eligible for state municipal contracts, pending further review. She looked up. Pending review of what? We haven't done anything wrong. Doesn't matter, Amy said. Her voice was flat, tired. He doesn't need us to have done something wrong. He just needs someone in that office who owes him a favor. She sat down heavily at her desk. 2 contracts. Contracts her team had spent months preparing for. Contracts that would have kept dozens of employees working through the year. Gone, with a single letter and no real explanation. Patricia sat across from her, quiet for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. The video won him donors leaving, she said finally. But he still owns half the relationships in that procurement office. This is what real power looks like. It doesn't care how many people saw the wine. Amy rubbed her eyes. She thought about her employees, about the families in 3 counties still waiting on water they'd been promised. She thought about how easy it had been for one man to erase months of work with a phone call nobody would ever be able to trace back to him directly. If we go after him through the state, she said slowly, we're playing his game, on his field, with people who already owe him something. So what do we do? Amy sat up straighter. Something in her chest hardened, the same steadiness that had kept her hand from shaking when the wine hit her scalp. We stop needing him, she said. We stop needing the state contracts he can pull strings on. We go straight to the counties, the ones who actually need the water. We build something he can't touch. Patricia blinked. You mean bypass the state bidding process entirely? I mean build a consortium, Amy said. A nonprofit, funded independently, run by us, answerable to the counties directly instead of some office Logan has in his pocket. He built his leverage on being the one holding the money. So we take the money question off the table. Patricia was already nodding, pulling her laptop closer, mind clearly racing through what it would take. That's not small. That's not something we throw together in a week. Then we don't throw it together, Amy said. We build it right, starting now. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the city. Somewhere out there, Logan was probably smiling, thinking he'd just reminded her exactly who held the power. He had no idea she was about to build something he couldn't freeze, couldn't blacklist, and couldn't buy his way into. Get me meetings with all 3 counties, Amy said, by the end of the week. The first meeting was in a small county office 2 hours outside the city, in a building with water stains on the ceiling tiles that made Amy's point for her before she'd even said a word. 3 representatives sat across the table. Men and women who'd spent years watching promises about clean water come and go, always tangled up in some funding deal that fell apart before the pipes ever went in the ground. Amy recognized the tired look in their eyes. She'd seen it in her own mirror lately. We've seen the video, one of the representatives said, before Amy had even opened her folder. Everybody's seen the video. Then you know why I'm here, Amy said, not to ask for pity, to ask for a chance to finish what should have already been done. Your families have waited long enough. She laid out the plan plainly, the way she always did. No fancy language, no spin. A nonprofit consortium, funded independently, run transparently, answerable to the counties themselves, instead of a state office that could be pressured with a phone call. No dependence on Logan's company. No dependence on anyone who could freeze it out of spite. We don't need his money, Amy said. We never did. We just need people willing to build something that actually gets finished. The room was quiet for a moment. Then the oldest representative at the table, a woman with silver hair and tired hands folded in front of her, spoke up. My grandkids have been drinking bottled water for 3 years, she said. I don't care whose name is on the check. I care whose name is on the finished pipe. By the end of the day, all 3 counties had agreed, at least in principle, to back the consortium publicly. News of it reached Logan by that evening. Roland Marsh delivered it the way he delivered most bad news lately, quietly, standing just far enough from the desk to avoid whatever came next. "They're calling it independent," Marsh said. "Public backing from all 3 counties. If this goes through, they don't need state approval routed through you anymore. They don't need your financing. They cut you out completely." Logan's jaw tightened. He'd built half his redevelopment plans around the assumption that the water contract money would keep flowing through channels he controlled. Losing the counties wasn't just embarrassing now, it was expensive. "She's turning this into a real threat," Logan said, more to himself than to Marsh. "She was always a real threat," Marsh said. "You just didn't think she'd fight back." Logan shot him a look, and Marsh went quiet, the way he always did when he'd said more than he meant to. "Get Felton on the phone," Logan said finally. "Tonight." Genesis Felton answered on the second ring, already sounding half asleep, but he sat up fast once Logan explained the situation. "She's got county backing," Logan said. "Public backing. If this consortium locks in, it's over. I need this stopped before it's signed." "Stopped how?" Felton asked. "Legally, there's nothing wrong with counties choosing a non-profit partner. You can't sue your way out of that." "I don't care how," Logan snapped. "Find something. There's a reporter running her story everywhere, feeding this whole thing. Start there. Make her nervous. Make her outlet nervous." People get quiet fast when lawyers start talking. Felton was quiet for a moment, clearly already thinking through angles. "Defamation threat," he said slowly. "It won't hold up long term, but it'll buy time. Make them second-guess publishing anything else until we sort this out." "Do it," Logan said. "Whatever it takes. I'm not losing this over one woman and a viral video." He hung up the phone and sat back in his chair, staring at nothing, his jaw still tight. For the first time since the gala, he wasn't smiling. Amy had taken his leverage. Now he was going to try to take her voice. The letter arrived at Danica Cross's office 2 days later, printed on heavy paper with Genesis Felton's name in bold letters across the top. Danica read it standing at her own desk, one hand braced against the edge. It accused her outlet of defamation, threatened a lawsuit that could cost more than her small paper had ever seen in a year, and demanded a public retraction of the gala story within 72 hours. She called Amy the second she finished reading it. "He's trying to scare me into pulling the story," Danica said, "threatening to sue me into the ground over something we both know is true." "Are you going to retract it?" Amy asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. "Not a chance," Danica said. "I've got the unedited footage. I've got you on record. He can threaten all he wants. I'm not backing down because a rich man doesn't like being seen for what he is." Amy felt something steady settle in her chest. Not everyone folded when men like Logan came at them with lawyers and money. Danica wasn't going to be one of them. "He's not just trying to scare you," Amy said slowly. "He's trying to prove money can bury the truth. If he wins this, it's not just about me anymore. It's about whether anybody can ever hold someone like him accountable." "Then let's make sure he doesn't win," Danica said. That same afternoon, Patricia sat buried in paperwork back at the office, going line by line through the original signed contract, the one Amy had torn in half at the gala, the copy their firm had kept on file. She was searching for anything that might strengthen their position for the new consortium agreement. Some clause about original funding sources that might matter for the county's records. She found something else entirely. Buried deep in the financial disclosures attached to the original deal was a clause referencing state pre-funding, money the state had allocated months before the gala, meant to jumpstart early infrastructure work for the water project. Patricia cross-referenced the dates against Logan's company's public financial filings, and her stomach dropped. The pre-funding had been transferred, but it hadn't gone toward the water project at all. It had been quietly redirected toward Logan's stalled downtown redevelopment project, a project that had nothing to do with clean water and everything to do with his own bottom line. She sat frozen for a long moment, reading it 3 times to make sure she wasn't misunderstanding the numbers. Then she grabbed her phone and called Amy. "You need to come look at this," Patricia said. "Now." Amy arrived within the hour. Patricia spread the documents across the conference table, walking her through the trail, the pre-funding allocation, the transfer dates, the redevelopment project that had quietly absorbed money, meant for children drinking unsafe water. "This predates the gala," Patricia said. "This isn't just him being cruel to you in front of a crowd. This is fraud. He took money meant for clean water and used it to build condos." Amy stared at the numbers, feeling something cold settle over the anger she'd been carrying for weeks. It wasn't just personal anymore. It never should have been. This was about every family in those 3 counties who'd been told to wait, while their water money paid for someone else's skyline. "Can we prove this holds up?" Amy asked. "Really prove it?" Patricia hesitated. "The clause is real. The transfer dates are real. But this is his company's internal financial routing. We don't have anyone inside confirming exactly how deep it goes, or who signed off on it. Without that, it's a paper trail with a hole in the middle." Amy looked at the documents again, then up at Patricia. "Then we need somebody inside," she said. "Somebody who already knows the truth and is scared to say it out loud." She thought of Marcia's face at the gala, the way he'd pulled Logan aside so fast after the wine, already worried about the fallout before anyone else in that room understood what they'd just witnessed. Somebody inside already knew. They just needed him to be brave enough to talk. Amy didn't call ahead. She walked straight into Logan's building, past the front desk, past the assistant who tried to stop her, and into his office without waiting for an invitation. Logan looked up from his desk, more annoyed than surprised. "You don't have an appointment," he said. "I don't need one," Amy said. She set a folder down on his desk, the pre-funding documents Patricia had pulled together, laid out clean and simple. "I know about the transfer. State money meant for the water project in those 3 counties. Redirected into your redevelopment project instead." For a second, something flickered across his face. Not guilt. Calculation. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, leaning back in his chair, unbothered. "I think you do," Amy said. "I think you took money meant for kids drinking unsafe water and used it to build condos nobody in those counties can afford. I think that's the real reason you needed my contract so badly. You needed something to point to, something to cover the hole." Logan's jaw tightened, just slightly, before the smile came back, wide and cold. "You want to know something?" he said. "You walked into a room I built, in a dress paid for by a contract you didn't earn. And now you're standing in my office accusing me of stealing from poor kids. That's rich. Even for you." "Say what you actually mean," Amy said, not moving. "You were a headline," Logan said, standing now, circling around the desk. "A good headline. Diverse CEO, big contract, feel-good story for the cameras. That's all you ever were to this deal. And now you think a folder of numbers is going to take me down?" He laughed, short and sharp. "Nobody's going to believe you over me. Nobody ever has." Amy felt the old anger rise, the same heat she'd swallowed at the gala. But she kept her voice level. "You're going to find out how wrong you are," she said. She picked up the folder, turned, and walked out without waiting for him to respond. Logan stood alone in his office for a long moment after the door shut, his hands braced against the desk. He called his board that afternoon, gathering the senior members on a hasty video call. He told them he intended to bury her company by spring, his voice full of the same confidence he'd used at the gala, like the wine pour had never happened, like the video didn't exist. Roland Marsh sat in the room during the call, quiet, watching Logan's face on the screen as he laughed off the accusation of stealing state funds meant for clean water. Marsh had flagged that exact transfer 8 months earlier, in a memo nobody had responded to. He remembered writing it, remembered the sick feeling in his stomach when he'd hit send, remembered being told to drop it and focus on the redevelopment timeline instead. He'd stayed quiet since. Everyone always stayed quiet around Logan. But watching him now, laughing about burying a woman who was only asking for the truth, something in Marsh's chest twisted tighter than it ever had before. That night, alone in his apartment, Marsh opened his laptop and pulled up old files he hadn't touched in months. Emails, internal memos, the original pre-funding transfer approval, buried 3 folders deep, with his own name attached to the flag he'd raised and been told to ignore. He didn't send anything. Not yet. He just saved copies, quietly, onto a separate drive, and closed the laptop like it had never happened. 2 days later, Amy received an official notice from the state, delivered by courier just like the last one. She read it twice before the words fully landed. Her company was now formally under investigation for misuse of the same state pre-funding Logan's company had actually diverted. The complaint had been filed anonymously, but the timing wasn't hard to understand. Patricia read the notice over her shoulder, her face going pale. "He's flipping it," Patricia said. "He's accusing you of exactly what he did." Amy set the letter down slowly on her desk, her hands steady even as her mind raced. He had taken his own crime and handed it to her, wrapped it in state letterhead, and dared her to prove otherwise. The investigation moved fast at first, faster than anyone expected. 2 weeks after the notice arrived, a state investigator called Patricia directly. The preliminary review, she said, had found no evidence of wrongdoing on Amalie Water Systems' part. No misused funds, no irregular transfers, nothing that matched the anonymous complaint filed against them. Patricia hung up the phone and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 2 weeks straight. "They're clearing us," she told Amy, practically running into her office. "Preliminary finding. No wrongdoing. It's not final yet, but it's the first real step." Amy felt something loosen in her chest for the first time in weeks. She allowed herself a small smile, the first one that felt real since the gala. The good news didn't stop there. Word of the preliminary finding leaked fast, and Danica Cross ran a follow-up story within days, laying the timeline out plainly for anyone still on the fence. A false accusation, quickly disproven, filed right after Amy exposed the pre-funding transfer. Readers didn't need much help connecting the dots. 2 more of Logan's donors quietly withdrew their names from his redevelopment project that week. Reporters who'd once printed his version of events without question started calling his office for comment and getting nothing back. The county consortium moved forward too. By the end of that same week, all 3 counties had signed preliminary agreements, ready to finalize funding through Amy's nonprofit structure within the month. For a moment, it looked like it was over, like she'd won. Amy let herself believe it, just for a few days. She let herself sleep through the night again. She let herself imagine breaking ground on the water project, imagined the counties she'd promised clean water finally getting it. No strings attached to a man who thought pouring wine on her head was funny. Then Genesis Felton found his opening. It came through a technicality buried deep in state procedure, a clause allowing any preliminary finding to be reopened if new information surfaced within 60 days. Felton manufactured that new information out of thin air, submitting a fresh complaint built on selectively edited financial documents, timed and worded just carefully enough to trigger an automatic review. The state reopened the investigation within days. Worse, as part of the reopened review, Amalie Water Systems operating accounts were frozen pending the outcome. Not just the disputed funds, everything. Payroll accounts, project accounts. The accounts meant to cover the early groundwork for the county consortium. Amy stood in her office reading the freeze notice, feeling the floor tilt beneath her. "They can't do this," Patricia said, but her voice didn't have much fight left in it. "Not without cause." "He gave them cause," Amy said quietly. "Fake cause, but cause." Her company, for all practical purposes, stopped operating that week. Employees couldn't be paid on time. Vendors pulled back. The consortium agreement, so close to finalized, stalled indefinitely while the counties waited to see if Amalie Water Systems would even survive the investigation. Then came the call from Marsh. He didn't say much. His voice was low, tight, like he'd rehearsed the words and still couldn't get them out clean. "I can't testify," he said. "I have the documentation. I have everything. But if I hand it over, I lose my job, my pension, everything I've built for 15 years. I have a family, Amy. I can't do it. Not yet." The line went quiet after that. Amy didn't yell at him. She understood fear better than most people gave her credit for. But understanding it didn't make the loss hurt any less. Without Marsh, the internal confirmation they needed was gone. The paper trail Patricia had found still existed, but it had a hole in the middle exactly where they needed it strongest. By the end of that week, the story had flipped completely in Logan's favor. New headlines painted him as a man targeted by a baseless smear campaign, patient and dignified through it all. Donors who'd walked away began quietly reaching back out. His redevelopment project moved forward, funded in part by money nobody was asking hard questions about anymore. Amy sat alone in her frozen, half-empty office that night, the lights off except for the glow of her phone screen. She scrolled back to the gala video, the one that had started all of this, and watched it again in the dark. Everything she'd built toward felt like it was slipping away. She just didn't know yet that the answer had been sitting in that footage the whole time. Amy sat in the dark for a long time before she noticed it. She had watched the gala video so many times by now that most of it had gone numb in her mind. The joke about quotas, the plate of scraps, the wine sliding down over her hair while the room laughed along. She knew every second of it by heart. She'd almost stopped really seeing it. But this time, instead of watching herself, she watched the background. There, just past Logan's shoulder, was Roland Marsh. In the moment, the wine hit her head. While half the room laughed and clapped along with their boss, Marsh wasn't laughing. He'd gone pale. His hand had come up toward his own mouth like he wanted to say something and physically stopped himself. When Amy stood to tear the contract, Marsh's eyes weren't on her. They were on Logan, wide and afraid, like a man watching a building start to collapse and already knowing he'd helped build the cracks. Amy paused the video and sat back. She thought about his call 2 nights ago. "I can't testify. I have everything. I have a family." She'd heard fear in his voice then and mistaken it for weakness. Watching his face now, frozen mid-flinch on her screen, she understood it differently. He wasn't protecting Logan. He never had been. He was protecting himself from a man he was clearly deeply afraid of. That kind of fear didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of watching what happened to people who crossed Winston Logan. She picked up her phone and texted Patricia. "Come in early tomorrow. I found something." Patricia arrived the next morning to find Amy already at the conference table. The video paused on her laptop, Marsh's frightened face frozen in the frame. "Look at him," Amy said, turning the screen toward her. "That's not the face of a man defending his boss. That's a man watching something he already knew was coming." Patricia studied it for a long moment. "You think he's the door?" "I think he's terrified," Amy said. And people who are terrified don't need convincing that a man is dangerous. They already believe it. What they need is a reason to believe staying quiet is more dangerous than talking. He already told you he can't testify, Patricia said carefully. What's changed? We stop asking him to be brave, Amy said. We stop asking him to walk into a spotlight and take Logan down single-handed. We show him something else instead. She pulled the old internal memo trail Patricia had found weeks earlier, the one referencing state pre-funding, the flag Marsh himself had raised 8 months before any of this happened, buried and ignored. His name is already on this, Amy said. Not as someone accusing Logan, as someone who saw the problem and reported it up the chain, the right way, months before I ever tore up that contract. If this ever surfaces on its own, through the investigation, through a subpoena, through anything, his name is already tied to it. He's exposed either way. The only thing he actually controls right now is which version of the story he's standing on when it comes out. Patricia sat back, turning it over. You're not asking him to become a whistleblower. You're showing him he already is one. He just hasn't decided if he's a hero or a scapegoat yet. Exactly, Amy said. She went to see him that same afternoon. Alone, no lawyers, no cameras. Marsh met her in a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks from his office, glancing at the door every few minutes like he expected someone to walk in and catch him. Amy slid the old memo across the table, his own name typed clearly at the bottom. You already flagged this, she said, 8 months ago, before any of this happened. You did the right thing once, and they buried it. If this comes out through the investigation instead of through you, it won't matter that you tried. It'll just look like you knew and said nothing while it got worse. Marsh stared at the paper for a long time, his jaw working. I have a family, he said again, quieter this time. So do the people in 3 counties who've been drinking bad water for years, Amy said. You already made your choice once. You just never got to see it through. Marsh sat in silence, staring at his own name on the page, at the warning he'd tried to raise, and watched disappear. Finally, he looked up. What do you need from me? He said. Marsh met them the next evening, this time at Patricia's apartment instead of a public coffee shop. He set a small drive on the kitchen table like it weighed 100 pounds, and for a moment, none of them said anything. It's all there, he said finally. Every internal email about the pre-funding transfer, the approval chain, my original memo, and the response telling me to drop it. Bank routing records showing exactly where the money went instead of the water project. He pushed the drive an inch closer to Patricia. I should have sent this 8 months ago. You're sending it now, Amy said. That's what matters. Patricia plugged the drive into her laptop that same night, and the 3 of them sat together going through it line by line. It matched everything Patricia had found on her own weeks earlier. The pre-funding clause, the transfer dates. But now there was no hole in the middle. Marsh's records showed exactly who approved the redirection, exactly when, and exactly how it had been buried afterward. Combined with the unedited gala footage establishing Logan's public character and motive, it wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a complete case. This is enough, Patricia said quietly, scrolling through the last of it. This is more than enough. They spent the next 2 days building the package carefully, making sure every piece connected to the last. Patricia cross-referenced Marsh's internal records against the state pre-funding clause she'd found in the original contract. Amy reviewed the gala footage again, time-stamping the exact moment Logan mocked her credentials on record, tying his public motive directly to the financial trail underneath it. When it was ready, they brought everything to Danica Cross. Danica read through it at her desk in near silence, occasionally letting out a low whistle at a particularly damning line in one of the internal emails. When she finished, she looked up at all 3 of them. "This isn't a story anymore," she said. "This is a documented case of fraud, with a paper trail and an insider confirming it. I can have this ready to publish inside 48 hours. There's something else," Amy said. "We don't just want this published. We want it timed." She laid out the plan carefully. Patricia would file the full evidence package with the state the same morning Danica published the story, so Logan couldn't get ahead of it privately, couldn't call in a favor to bury it before it ever reached the public. Everything would drop at once, loud enough that nobody could quietly make it disappear. Danica nodded slowly. Timing like that only works if there's a moment big enough to land in. Something public. Something he can't spin his way out of in a private phone call. That was when Patricia found it, scrolling through public event listings while the others talked. Logan was hosting another gala that same week, a follow-up event, clearly meant to repair the damage from the last one, courting a fresh round of donors after so many had walked away. Same ballroom. Same kind of room full of cameras and money. Amy stared at the listing for a long moment. "He's rebuilding the room that watched him humiliate me," she said. "In the same place." "That's not a coincidence you have to create," Patricia said. "That's a gift." They finalized the plan that night. Danica would hold the story, fully written and verified, ready to publish the instant Patricia filed the evidence with the state. Both would happen simultaneously, timed for the exact morning of Logan's new gala, so the story would break while he stood in that same ballroom, mid-toast to a new set of donors, with no time to control the narrative before it reached every phone in the room. Marsh agreed to be there in person, not to speak first, just to be present, in case Logan tried to deny it in front of everyone. So there would be someone standing in that room who could confirm the truth out loud if it came to that. Amy looked around the table at Patricia, at Danica, at Marsh, still uneasy, but no longer looking away. "He built his whole comeback around that room," Amy said. "Let's make sure it's the room where it ends." Nobody argued. There was nothing left to plan. Every piece was in place. Every piece pulled from something already true, already documented, already sitting quietly in the dark for months until somebody was brave enough to bring it into the light. All that was left now was to wait for the night of the gala. The ballroom looked almost exactly like it had before. Same chandeliers throwing gold light across the marble floor. Same tables dressed in white linen. Same kind of donors in expensive suits, holding wine glasses, waiting for a reason to feel good about where their money was going. Winston Logan stood at a podium near the head table, tapping his glass with a fork, calling the room to attention. Amy wasn't in the room this time. She didn't need to be. She sat in Patricia's office 3 miles away, both of them watching a live stream of the event on a laptop, phones ready, waiting for the signal. Marsh was in the room, standing near the back, doing his best to look like just another guest. Logan raised his glass. "Tonight," he said, his voice booming just like it had the last time, "is about new beginnings, new partners, new projects that are going to change this city." He smiled wide, scanning the crowd of fresh faces, none of whom had been in the room for the wine, for the torn contract, for any of it. To the future. Glasses lifted around the room. At exactly that moment, 3 miles away, Patricia hit publish. Danica's story went live across every platform at once, timed to the second. The headline was direct and impossible to misread. "Billionaire diverted state water funds to fund his own redevelopment project. Internal records confirm." The unedited gala footage sat at the top again, but now it ran alongside financial records, transfer dates, and Marsh's original ignored memo, laid out in plain, simple language anyone could follow. Phones across the ballroom lit up almost simultaneously. At first, it looked like nothing. A few guests glanced down at their screens out of habit. Then one woman near the front gasped audibly. Then another. Within a minute, half the room had stopped listening to Logan entirely, heads bent over their phones, whispering to each other. Logan noticed the shift before he understood it. He kept talking, faster now, trying to hold the room's attention, but the energy had already left him. "Is everyone still with me?" he asked, forcing a laugh that didn't land the way it used to. A reporter near the back, one Danica had tipped off in advance, stood up and asked the question everyone else was suddenly too stunned to ask themselves. "Mr. Logan, is it true you diverted state pre-funding meant for the water project into your own redevelopment plans?" The room went dead silent, the same kind of silence that had fallen the night Amy tore up the contract, except this time it wasn't circling her. It was circling him. "That's a baseless accusation," Logan said, his voice sharp, defensive. "Some kind of smear campaign cooked up by—" "There are internal records," the reporter said, holding up her phone. "Confirmed by someone inside your own company." Genesis Felton pushed through the crowd toward the podium, trying to get to Logan before he said anything worse. But it was already too late. Cameras were up. Phones were recording. The room that had once laughed along with him now watched with a different kind of attention. "This is a private event," Felton said, trying to take control. "Any further questions can be directed to—" "Is it true?" the reporter pressed, louder this time. Logan's jaw worked, his eyes darting across the room, searching for someone to back him up. His gaze landed on Marsh, standing near the back, still and pale. "Roland," Logan said, half command, half plea. "Tell them this is nonsense." Marsh stood there for a long moment. Every eye in the room turned toward him. He thought about the memo he'd written 8 months ago, the one nobody had answered. He thought about Amy's voice in that coffee shop, telling him he'd already made his choice once and never gotten to see it through. "I can't do that," Marsh said, his voice shaking but clear enough to carry. "It's true. I flagged it myself months ago. I was told to drop it." Gasps rippled through the room, louder this time. A donor near the front stood up, set his glass down hard on the table, and walked straight for the exit without a word. Another followed. Then another. Logan stood frozen at the podium, wine glass still in his hand, watching the room he had built his entire comeback around turn its back on him in real time. For the first time since the night he'd poured wine over Amy's head and laughed, Winston Logan had nothing left to say. By morning, the story had spread far beyond anything Danica could have predicted the night before. Every major outlet had picked it up. Logan's name sat beside words like fraud and diverted funds and insider confirms on screens across the country. The video from the follow-up gala, Marsh's shaking voice, the donors standing and walking out one after another, played on repeat, right alongside the original footage of the wine. The state acted fast once the evidence was formally filed. Within days, Logan's company lost its eligibility for state contracting entirely. His board scrambled to distance themselves, releasing a statement claiming they'd been unaware of the fund diversion, though nobody watching believed that for long. Felton resigned from representing him within the week, unwilling to attach his name to what was left of Logan's reputation. The investigation against Amy's company was formally dropped and reversed, the record corrected to show exactly what had happened. A retaliatory complaint filed to bury the truth, not protect it. And the counties finally got their answer. With the state's blessing and full funding restored, the water infrastructure contract was awarded to Amy's nonprofit consortium in full. Not a scaled-back version. Not a compromise. The complete project, expanded now to cover ground the original deal hadn't even reached, funded transparently, answerable directly to the 3 counties who'd waited years for it. 2 weeks later, Amy stood in the same ballroom where it had all started. The gala this time wasn't Logan's. It belonged to the counties, a small celebration marking the official groundbreaking of the water project. The chandeliers still hung overhead, the same gold light spilling across the marble floor. But the room felt different now, lighter. County representatives stood near the front. The same tired woman with silver hair who'd once told Amy she cared whose name was on the finished pipe, not the check, now smiling as she spoke to a small crowd about construction starting within the month. Patricia stood beside Amy, holding a folder with the newly signed contract inside. Whole this time, not torn, backed by real money that couldn't be frozen on a stranger's whim. Danica was there too, notebook in hand, out of habit more than necessity. Even Marsh had come, standing a little apart from the crowd, still uneasy in rooms like this, but present. He'd lost his job at Logan's company the week the story broke. He hadn't complained once. A young reporter approached Amy near the edge of the room, microphone in hand, echoing the same kind of question asked in this exact space months earlier. "What does this deal mean for the counties?" she asked. Amy thought about the plate of scraps, the wine sliding down her back while a room full of powerful people laughed along, the torn contract on the table, the frozen accounts. Marsh's shaking voice in a room that had once belonged entirely to Logan. "It means the water was never going to wait for anyone's ego," Amy said. "It was always going to happen. It just took a little longer than it should have, because somebody thought his name mattered more than people's lives." She didn't say Logan's name. She didn't need to. Everyone in that room already knew exactly who she meant. The reporter opened her mouth for a follow-up question, but Amy was already turning away, the contract safe in Patricia's hands, the county's representatives waiting to shake hers. Outside, past the tall windows, the night sky stretched dark and clear over the city. Somewhere beyond it, 3 counties were finally getting what they'd been promised. Clean water, running through pipes that belonged to no one's ego, but the people who needed it. Amy walked out of the ballroom into that night, wine long gone from her hair, the applause behind her real this time, earned instead of performed. She didn't look back. She didn't need to anymore. 3 months later, Amy stood on dry, cracked earth in the first of the 3 counties, a hard hat under one arm, watching a line of trucks roll in loaded with pipe. It didn't look like much yet. Just dirt, stakes in the ground marking where the new water lines would run. A small crowd of local families gathered along the edge of the site, with folding chairs and coffee thermoses, waiting for the ceremony to start. But to the people standing there, it looked like everything. The silver-haired county representative found her near the front, gripping her hand tight before the speeches began. 3 years, the woman said. 3 years of bottled water for my grandkids. 3 years of being told to wait. She looked out at the trucks, at the trench markers stretching toward the horizon. And now, look. Now look, Amy repeated, and meant it. Patricia stood a few feet away, going over the final construction schedule with the site foreman, though there wasn't really anything left to negotiate. The funding was locked. The contract was whole. Nobody could freeze it, blacklist it, or quietly redirect it into someone else's skyline. It belonged to the counties now, exactly the way it always should have. When the ceremony started, the mayor of the smallest county spoke first, thanking the consortium, thanking the crews about to break ground, thanking the families who'd waited so long they'd nearly stopped believing this day would come. Then he turned to Amy. "Would you like to say something?" he asked. Amy walked to the small platform they'd set up. No microphone stand this time, just a handheld mic and a folding table. She looked out at the crowd, construction workers in hard hats, families who'd driven out early to watch, a couple of local reporters with notebooks instead of cameras, crews. No wine glasses, no chandeliers, no one waiting to see if she'd flinch. "I'm not going to give a long speech," she said. "You've waited long enough for water. You don't need to wait through a speech, too." A few people laughed, warm and easy. This project almost didn't happen, she continued. Not because the water wasn't needed. It was always needed. It almost didn't happen because somebody with a lot of money decided his name mattered more than your kids drinking clean water. He was wrong. And today proves it. She looked out over the trench markers, the trucks, the crew already lining up equipment near the first dig site. This ground is going to have real pipes in it soon. Real water. Not somebody's leverage. Not somebody's headline. Just water. Running the way it was always supposed to. She stepped back from the mic to applause that didn't need convincing, didn't need performing. It just came, steady and full, from people who'd waited years for exactly this moment. Afterward, as the crowd thinned and the crew began setting up for the first real day of digging, Patricia found Amy standing near the edge of the site, watching the trench line stretch out toward the horizon. "You okay?" Patricia asked. Amy nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about that gala. How small this all could have stayed if I'd just eaten the scraps and smiled for the cameras." "You didn't," Patricia said. "That's the whole point." Amy watched the first excavator roll forward, blade lowering toward the dirt. "Any word on him?" she asked, not needing to say the name. Patricia shrugged. "Last I heard, he's selling off 2 properties to cover legal fees. No state contracts left anywhere in the region. Most of his old donors won't return his calls." Amy didn't smile at that. Not exactly. It wasn't triumph she felt watching the excavator bite into the earth. It was something steadier, something closer to relief. "Good," she said simply, and turned back toward the site, toward the work that actually mattered now. Behind her, the first shovel of dirt turned over, dark and damp, marking the real beginning of everything the gala had almost destroyed before it ever had the chance to start. 6 months after the first shovel broke ground, Amy stood in a kitchen that wasn't hers, watching a woman turn on a faucet for the first time. It was a small house in the first county, nothing special to look at from the outside. But the water that came out of that tap ran clear. No boil advisories taped to the cabinet. No cases of bottled water stacked by the door. Just water, the way it was supposed to be. The homeowner, a woman named Ruth who'd lived in that house for 30 years, filled a glass and drank it right there in front of everyone, laughing when she came up for air. "Tastes like nothing," she said. "Best thing I've ever tasted." Amy laughed with her, and for a moment, standing in that small kitchen with cameras from a local news crew filming quietly in the corner, she let herself feel the full weight of how far this had come. Not the anger anymore. Not the memory of wine sliding down her back or scraps on a plate. Just this. A glass of clean water, and a woman who'd waited 3 years to drink it without fear. Patricia met her outside afterward, leaning against the car, scrolling through her phone. "You're going to want to see this," Patricia said, turning the screen toward her. It was a small news item, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Winston Logan's company had officially dissolved that morning, its remaining assets sold off to cover legal settlements and unpaid debts. No press conference, no final toast. Just a quiet filing buried in the business section, the kind of ending that men like him spent their whole lives making sure never happened to them. Amy read it once, then handed the phone back. She didn't feel the surge of triumph she might have expected months ago, back when the wound was still raw. What she felt instead was quieter, steadier, like a door closing on something that no longer had any power to reach her. "No comeback story," Patricia said. "No redemption arc. Just gone." "Good," Amy said. "Some stories don't deserve a second act." That evening, all 3 counties gathered together for the first time since the groundbreaking, this time to mark the project's completion. It wasn't a gala. There were no chandeliers, no head tables, no cameras chasing a press moment. Just folding tables set up outside the county office, string lights hung between 2 trees, and families who could finally stop worrying about something as basic as the water coming out of their own taps. Marsh came, standing near the edge of the gathering the way he always did now, still finding his footing after everything he'd lost. He'd started consulting for small water utilities in the months since, using what he knew to help build systems instead of hide the theft of them. Amy crossed the yard to find him. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I wanted to," Marsh said. "I spent a long time being part of the reason people didn't have this." He looked out at the crowd, at kids running between the tables while their parents talked. "Figured I owed it to myself to see what it looks like when it finally gets fixed." Amy didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. She just nodded and let him stand there, watching the same thing she was watching. Danica found her a little later, notebook tucked away for once, just enjoying the evening like everyone else. "You ever think about writing your own version of all this?" Danica asked. "Somebody's going to tell this story eventually." Amy looked out over the yard, at Ruth from the small house sitting at one of the tables, laughing with her neighbors. At the county representative with the silver hair, finally looking rested. At Patricia, deep in conversation with one of the local kids about how the pipes actually worked underground. "You already told it," Amy said. "Better than I ever could." The string lights flickered on as the sky darkened, and somewhere beneath their feet, water ran clean and steady through pipes that belonged to no one's ego, no one's leverage, no one's spite. Amy stood there a long while, letting the evening settle around her, finally still. The fight was over. The water had won. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.